I like the red lights.
The villain era.
Oh, I love it. I love the mood. I am here for that. I needed a memo on that.
Sorry. I just last
Not
minute
that I,
spruce.
not that I could have done anything. Welcome to Keeping It Real. I am your host, Meredith Willits. This is my amazing daughter, co-producer, and sidekick, and Egg McMahon, and all that good stuff, Skylar. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm excited for this topic tonight because it's fun.
It is a fun topic. It's a trending topic, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a trending topic. Thank you so much for being here. Hi, Sharon. Hi, Woody. Nice to see you. If anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. Skylar is watching all of the good stuff. If you have any questions or if you want to come up on stage and have a comment, you can either type it or you can ask it verbally or you can actually come on video. It's really up to you, especially if you have red lighting. I mean, I'm here for it. But I think we should probably introduce the topic, considering last week you brought this up to me and I didn't even know what the heck you were talking about. So I think we might need to explain what is a villain era, and yeah, go.
So I think that you should give your perspective on what you've learned the last week of what a villain era is.
Well, I haven't learned anything this week because clearly I'm on the other side of TikTok. I'm on the meditation, all that other stuff, side of TikTok. But from what you said, it's basically when you are going through a period of your life journey and you decide or just enter the energy of, I'm not putting up with any more crap. I'm done. I'm over it.
Kind of taking back your power.
Taking back your power. Every time I have this conversation with you, I keep seeing Maleficent. Mm-hmm. Maleficent. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
I always see that because, it's a strong woman. And I mean, I don't even really know if she was a bad guy. My problem with the villain era is not so much the idea behind it. I don't like the term.
You don't like the name?
I don't like the name because it makes you sound like you're being a bad person for taking your power back. And I think that is a really big problem for this trend.
So to go into a little bit more about what the villain era is specifically, it is taking back your power not only for yourself, but also in your friendships. So to give an example of what this looks like is I had friends that were not necessarily bad people. They weren't necessarily, not my speed. They just didn't treat me with respect. They would leave my house a mess. They would eat all my food, didn't treat me with respect. And I took back my power to be like, yeah, I'm going to separate myself from that. So it's in the sense of taking back your power, not putting up with the BS of society, not caring what literally anyone thinks of you. So not caring that, well, why are you not friends with them anymore? Because I don't want to be. Well, give me an explanation. I don't need one.
Right.
So just because some people, again, don't understand the villain era, and I think that I agree with you in the terms that the name of it is awful.
Awful. Because you're not a bad guy for having healthy boundaries. You're not a bad person. And this goes back to a couple weeks ago, if you missed nice versus kind. I think this is so in line with nice versus kind. Like, you If you were worried about everyone thinking that you're nice and being a people pleaser and doing what everyone wants you to do, then you would probably have a really difficult time taking back your power and putting up those healthy boundaries, because your main concern would be everyone else around you. And what we're learning now, I just have to sidebar. I have
Sidebar.
been alive for 49 years. And I have to tell you, and I don't know if it's TikTok, if it's social media, if it's all the above, it's the end of the earth as we know it. It literally is amazing to me how much we are learning as people, as women, in such a neck breaking speed, how to be healthier humans.
I think everything is finally getting a label. Everything's finally getting a
Yeah.
term. Because
Yeah.
before we just saw a girl being a girl and we were like, ooh, what's happening to her? We saw a woman in her villain era and we didn't have this term for
Yeah,
it.
she was just a bitch.
She was just a bitch, yeah.
She's just a bitch. Like, unless she was running around, people pleasing and just kowtow, I think that's the word, down to everybody, then she's a bitch and she doesn't care about anyone and she's just stuck up. And it's interesting because when I was growing up, it's like, she's a bitch, she's stuck up, so on and so forth. And now we'd look at her and go, she's boss, she's claiming her power. She doesn't have to put up with, any garbage from boys or family or friends. It's just, to me, it's mind-blowing to me how much more together your generation is going to be, and honestly, all of us moving forward, if we're paying attention and want to know better and then do better. There's so much access right now to learning these different things. So, going even back, I don't know, 6 months ago, and saying to myself that it's okay that everyone doesn't necessarily like me.
That's a hard
It's
one.
Yeah, that is really mind blowing. And not only that, as we've seen, I'm sure you've seen memes and whatever else, is you kind of don't want everyone to like you, because that means you're just living beige.
Beige.
Beige. You're not, you're not, you're not standing up for anything. You're not standing up for yourself. You're not creating the healthy boundaries. And with the villain era, to go back to that term, which I hate. I hate it. Because it makes you not want to claim it. But that could be a me generation thing. Maybe your generation doesn't give a shit if they're a villain. Like, they're like, okay, I'm the villain. But you know what? I'm sorry, I'm all over the place because I love the topic. I just think, and they're bringing me, whenever I say they, guys, it's, higher self, spirit guys, whatever. What they're showing me right now is like, I've seen videos recently that, like, in some people's story, I'm the savior. In some people's story, I'm the villain. In some people's story, I'm no one. And so, are you willing to be the villain in someone else's story to be your own queen?
To be, ooh, I love that. I love that.
Okay?
Now, the only thing I don't like about the name is the era part because I feel like it's not an era, it's almost a change of lifestyle. Because there should never be a point in your life where you stop being in your quote unquote villain era, where you stop taking control of your life, letting people walk all over you, that type of thing. And
Yeah.
I think a big part of villain era too is also not caring about anything of societal standards of what they think. Obviously, and I think a lot of people, when I say don't care about society, it's not necessarily you don't post on Instagram, don't post, you just post what you want. You do what
Yeah.
you want.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I'm seeing when you were saying that was this I think that it could be an era, because when you're in people pleaser nice, there needs to be some sort of shift that happens. And sometimes that shift is abrupt. Sometimes that shift turns out to be kind of bitchy because you're not really sure how to manage it. You're not sure how to walk from nice to healthy boundaries. So it's kind of disjunctive, it's kind of staccato, it's kind of, you're tripping and falling a little bit, so it might come off as bitchy. And so when we go from nice person that has no boundaries to boundaries, I think that what it is all of a sudden you're seen that way or you feel that way. And then as you move through that era, which could be a day, it could be a week, it could be 2 years, it could be 10 years. It matters how long it takes you to kind of get into those hips of I'm allowed. I don't have to have an attitude. I don't have to be angry. I don't have to be, whatever. And I can be kind. I can have healthy boundaries and I don't need to come off a certain kind of way to make sure that all of that happens. So I think that there is an era before, during, and then after. I feel like I'm in my after where now I felt like I was fighting and pushing against. So the villain era to me, as it's unfolding during our conversations, as it always does on here, it just slowly unfolds over the
We
hour.
kind of give each other topics and then call it a day. We're like, okay, peace, talk to you Monday.
I know, right? It's like, and so we'll see where it goes. But I think that as your villain self and your villain era unfolds, you need to push against less. When I first started what I would probably consider my villain era, which was owning self and not putting up with people's shit anymore, even so much as to, okay, I have 3 appointments scheduled today, block, 3 appointments, block, and really kind of taking time for self-care even, because that could be considered this taking time for self could be looked at as being a villain, not running around making yourself exhausted for everyone can be seen as being a villain. And so I think as you move through the villain era and into being more comfortable with the healthy boundaries and not being a nice person with no boundaries and no self-care, you don't have to be the villain anymore. You don't have to push against. And I think that I don't know, maybe that's what they're talking. So let's go back to your friends. Perfect example. Let's go back to your friends and you had to put those healthy boundaries. Remember the moment that you decided to put those healthy boundaries. Was there anger? Was there frustration? Was there animosity? And now you're moving forward. And is there a different energy to where you started with that decision and where you are now? Is there a different energy to it?
I have to say the difference between that would be the energy of I let myself get to this point of like being broken almost that pushed me past it. And now the energy of I don't let anybody break me. Like I don't let anyone get to that point. I not cut it off, but I set the respect and I set the boundaries. And I think also the difference there is now people see me in a different light. Like they see Skylar Shagvac as someone who asks for respect and will not accept anything else but.
Yeah.
So I feel like that kind of helps me in the future too, also with the attitude towards me because you were in your villain era, now people maybe respect you.
Isn't it so funny that we need to like kind of switch it up to get that sometimes with people? Like you have to be mean or angry or frustrated or kind of call attention to with some people. Like they just push and push and push and push. And then it's up to you to go, nope, we're not doing this. Like, I think it's so interesting that people do that, but I guess maybe that's just a part of human nature. So if that's the case, that it's part of human nature to push each other And I actually had a conversation with Monica about this. Ooh, I like this. So last Tuesday, so I have another show with Monica Morton, Strong Boss Bitches. And on that show, we talked about what's it called in the workplace, sexual harassment in the workplace. And so I started researching it, and they call it predatory. It's like predatory behavior in the workplace where a person will say to another person, I don't want to say boys and girls or men and women, women, men. A person will say to another person, "Oh, I like that outfit. It looked nice today." Nothing said. And then they push a little bit more. "Oh man, are you working out? Like I noticed you
Like
look like
gradual.
right." And so they push a little bit, and then it's like, "Damn, you look good today." Like, and then it's, "Hey, you want to go out for drinks?" And so they just keep pushing and pushing, waiting for you to either smack their hand and say enough is enough, or report them, or do nothing. And I thought that was a really interesting concept because I never thought of that as being calculated predatory behavior. But then once I started realizing it, because I'm slow to learn stuff, clearly, and then once I get it, I'm like, wow, that's so interesting. That it's almost like in the world is we have to kind of, or we can look at these behaviors as being sort of predatory. And when people push and push and push and push, and then it's up to us to say, this isn't working for me anymore. I don't really like where we're headed with this. How interesting is that? So, when you did that with your friends, when you told your friends, we're not moving forward with this anymore, did you have to slap the hand, or could you say, this isn't working for me? Like, what did that, because a lot of people talk about healthy boundaries, but no one ever talks about how they got them.
Well, at that point, to be honest with that friendship, it was like so far gone on the aspect of when I was trying to set my healthy boundaries. So a big thing would be like I pay for everything in my own life. And they would come in and it would be like we'd open 7 bags of chips. I don't know, this is just like one of those things. It
Right.
was like one like the last thing. Like don't think this is the only thing. But like they would open every bag of chips and go to bed and not close any of them. And I'd
Right.
wake up and it'd be like 7 bags of chips stale and I'd be like, that's like $30. Like, come on. Like I
No,
bought
right.
these chips so that we could like so that when you come over, you
They're
can
here.
enjoy them. You know what I mean? And so when you ask, can you tell that there's any type of passion there? Sorry.
Still
um
living in you.
so I feel like like when you ask for that respect so many times and you're like, hey, like can we do this, can we do that, and I started off with small things such as the chips and not necessarily the big things because those are a little bit harder to approach, and in the sense of when they kept disrespecting the small things that I would ask them for when I was trying to take back my power in like a little tiny like hey type of
Right.
way and not a hey because I couldn't do that in the moment.
I love this so much that we're having this conversation, and I hope everyone else is listening. Thank Liz, Christian, everybody. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. We're here to answer questions or make you a part of the conversation. I love what you're saying here. And this is the villain era. Ready? They have no problem being a wild piece of shit. But
Opening all
you have a problem saying, please don't do that. Isn't it so amazing? But this is the predatory where we go, I don't want to be that girl. I don't want to be mean. I don't want to cause a stink. I don't. And it's just like, but wait a minute. Wait a minute. They have no problem being an asshole, but you have, why are we have such a hard time being an asshole when someone's an asshole?
but I
Villain.
think
Maybe we need to own the villain era. Holy shit. Maybe there's a purpose for it being called the villain era is because we need to show up as the freaking villain and say, no, fuck you. Stop opening up the damn chips.
exactly. And I think for me, a big thing that got me into my villain era were those small victories, those small asks,
Yeah.
those small stick ups for myself.
And you survived it. And you survived it.
And also, on the flip side of that, I think a big thing that helped me enter that as well is knowing when to not talk back.
Explain.
So, example, my dad clearly does not like my red hair. He came for vacation, he maybe said 4 to 5, 10 things on it. I could have argued, I could have stuck up for myself, I could have had my power in that moment of saying, hey, dad, I actually think my red hair looks awesome. I said it once. The next 10 times, I had my power of not caring what he thought, of his
Mm,
words deflecting off of me,
yeah.
of his words not meaning anything,
Yeah.
and not fighting back
I
because
saw
that
that
is a
today.
waste of my energy.
I saw that today with Elise Myers. I don't know if anyone follows her on TikTok. I'm sure she's on Instagram as well. But she was saying that she was a front desk clerk at a hotel, and this guy came up and he slid his credit card and he was being a prick. And she just says, "I did not receive that," and then just like walked away from him at the front desk. He was like swearing and being a turd. And she said, well, some of my friends were like, well, why don't you stick up for yourself? And what she said was, I'm not even going to give it the energy of pushing back.
Of caring.
I'm not going to even care so much to go any further. I'm deflecting. I'm literally not receiving it at all. So if I argue with you, now you are living rent free in my head. Now you're using up my energy. And so I kind of think as we're talking about this, and it's been a whole 21 minutes from us hating the villain era, and now all of a sudden I kind of
Love
like
it.
it. because 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 people that we need to be villainous with deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they deserve it. And maybe so when I first started doing group coaching, I took this the Tony Robbins class. And one of the exercises that they taught us is to use different archetypes. Okay? And so an archetype is like if you want to be more lighthearted when your kids are around, you would embrace the archetype of the jester. And so I of course made up my own, and I'm like, when women have their whole day and they're breastfeeding or they're taking care of kids or they're whatever working, and then they get home and their husbands are like sexy time, and you're like, I have been breastfeeding all day, you can kiss my ass. And so I say to kind of to switch, give yourself 20 minutes to switch into that sexy time archetype. Because with women, we play so many roles. And being a mom sometimes is such a difficult role to go from mom, caretaker, business person, what driver, taxi driver around the world. And then all of a sudden, sex kitten. And so to embrace that energy and that archetype, I coach women a lot of times to understand and embrace and enter into that archetype. So, and then
So it's
there,
almost
but
like entering into another, in for lack archetype space. You're entering into another room. You're entering into another.
personality, everything. Yep. You're owning that part of yourself. You're literally putting that hat on. You're literally owning that and allowing your energy to shift into so when it comes to being like so all day you're paying bills, you're doing your job, you're very focused, and then all of a sudden your kids walk in the door at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and they're like, Mom, can you blah blah blah, and you're like, I'm paying bills. I got a mortgage, like I'm stressed out. And so they say to incorporate and put on the hat of the jester. And so there's different, and it's just kind of like embodying your boss bitch, embodying your career person. It's shifting gears, and using an archetype helps you to shift gears because you can visualize it, understand the role, understand the energy behind it. So with the villain era, there's an energy there that almost says, hey, when your mom calls not me calling you, but like if
Never.
like what like not us. But if if your mom calls or your boss calls or your somebody calls or a friend calls and says, "Hey, can you watch my kids for 3 hours?" and you really don't have time to do that, you go, "Villain. No, actually I can't today, but maybe some other time." So it's almost like embracing the archetype of the villain to see yourself, to own the word no. I can't. Not today. This isn't working for me. Buy your own damn chips next time, because they had no problem being an asshole to you. So why can't you embrace your inner villain and say, quit treating me like shit?
And I think that you originally didn't necessarily like the term villain
I didn't, but
because you
now I love
just
it.
saw it as them being bad, but it's actually you just reaction.
Exactly.
So
It's
now
actually type. Yeah,
we're
I
in
love it.
this villain era. We've arrived.
Yeah.
How do we own it?
I think that, and the reason I didn't like the word villain is because it's a bad guy, right? And who wants to be the bad guy? Some people, I guess, but it's hard. It's hard to say, I want to be the bad guy, that it's okay to be the bad guy, that it's healthy to be the bad guy. But I
That you
think
might
that
lose
when,
some friends.
what?
That you might lose some friends by setting healthy boundaries for yourself.
Right. But, the thing of it is I was watching another thing today, and this gal was talking about, if you don't want to be with someone or be around someone anymore, and you break up with them or vice versa, and because of that separation, you treat them badly or retaliate, you never really love them to begin with. And I think that is true with what we're talking about here, which is, it's okay to set healthy boundaries, but when you come from this Puritan bullshit, waspy ass, being nice at all costs, I think it's really difficult to go from the nice, good girl archetype, good boy archetype, to the villain archetype where you have healthy boundaries. And I think if we can embrace the villain, we might not have to go all the way to bitchy asshole. I think that villain actually might be the precursor to martyr. I think that villain might be the precursor to passive aggressive, to losing your shit,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's interesting. It's a very double edged fine line when you walk the word villain between, are you just being a dick, or are you standing up for yourself? And so I think each person has to figure that out in time. Um,
And I
yes,
think not just
it's
standing up for yourself, like to other people, but standing up for yourself to yourself. So
yeah,
for me, that was fully owning. I want to go outside with cat eyeliner and not care that anyone else in the entire world is not wearing it. I want to dye my hair red. Like owning the fact that you can feel good about what you want.
yeah,
So I feel like owning others and yourself, I feel like that's the big two of the villain era for sure.
yeah, and finding yourself as being valuable. I mean, when you look at the other thing now that I'm looking at with the word villain, is in most movies where we've gotten, I mean, I'm assuming this is where we're pulling the word villain. In most situations, a villain, there's only one of them. So if you look at a movie, be it, with Maleficent or otherwise, let's go all the way back to The Wizard of Oz, right? Everybody's nice, everybody's sweet and kind and rose-colored glasses, but there's one villain. They stand out. They're different. They don't care. They want what they want. And, this is, of course, where we go back to the, how far do you go with being the villain? But it's also an interesting idea of kind of owning your own self and standing out, not trying to fit in, not needing to fit in, being okay with being totally different. And, I tell people all the time, because I coach a lot of people that have a hard time being different, and it's so funny because it's like, if I had a nickel for every one of you that said, I just, and I'm like, instead of looking at yourself as being weird or different, why don't you look at yourself as being an inspiration? you know and so the thing of it is when you're different, or you're foraging your own way in life, maybe a lot of people see you as being the villain, but that doesn't make it necessarily true. Maybe you're just an inspiration. And when people see you standing up for yourself, you're being an inspiration to all the other people around you who are raised the same way, that allow bullies to step on you. So is the villain, interesting, here we go, ready? Is the villain the counterpart to the bully?
I kind of love this because going back into my sorority days, I was always the one in the sorority to be like, yeah, that's bullshit. Like, we're not doing that. Like, I would call out everyone. So,
Right.
half the sorority was like, she is the worst human being in the entire world. And half of the sorority was like, oh my
We
God,
love
I
her.
love her.
Right.
And the other day I went back to said sorority meeting, and I told Kleber I had like 10 girls that were there, like, hey, Skylar, hey, Skylar, hey, Skylar. And all of the girls who hated me for being, not all of them, I mean, there's still some that hate me.
Right.
Some of the girls that were like, screw this girl in her villain era, screw this girl speaking up for what she believes in, now do the same thing and are on that same boat and have actually approached me and been like, I totally respect you. So,
Right.
like, it takes people shifting into that themselves. It takes people understanding speaking up for themselves is okay, to
Yeah.
then maybe realize that you're not the villain.
You're not the villain. Maybe the villain is actually the hero, because the villain is 90% of the time going to go against the bullies.
And it actually truly amazes me, being graduated and out of the sorority a year or so. It actually amazes me how many girls have reached out and have said, I didn't respect you then, but I respect you now.
Right, because
And I
everyone
wonder,
wants to fit in. And so you were going against the grain. You were making everyone uncomfortable. And people don't like to be uncomfortable. No one wants the person that raises their hand and calls people out. But if we don't have the villain, if we don't have, and so isn't the villain anyone and everyone that goes against the norm? And isn't the norm the patriarchy, white supremacy, bully bullshit that we've been putting up with forever? And so we need the villain. We need someone to stand up and go, no more. If we look back in history, was Martin Luther King Jr. the villain? Was Malcolm X the villain? Probably. They were all in their villain era, because they were going against nice society. They were going against the norm. They were going against the bullies who were trying to keep, is it the quid pro quo? No, they were trying to keep, I forget the Latin term, but the norm. Right? And so you, with your sorority, there was a norm, and you were speaking out and speaking up towards the norm. Can you do that without owning your shit and going into your villain era? Can we exist, unless you were, born this way, of being a stander up for yourself, right? But if you started off nice, and now all of a sudden you're realizing that shit's not working, schools aren't working, religion's not working, none of this shit's working, patriarchy, white supremacy, none of this shit works. And so we need villains. We need the bad guy to go, this shit doesn't work. And all the people around are going to go, why she got to ruffle feathers? Why does he have to ruffle feathers? I don't want her to ruffle feathers. So can we change our planet? Can we change our society without going through a villain era when we were raised as nice? And we're not talking Putin villain. We're talking feather rufflers.
And I think such an interesting thing on this is everyone can have their own villain era, whether it be, am I sticking up for women's rights, environmental rights? Am I sticking up just for myself to say, close the damn bag of chips? You
Right.
can have your own villain era of importance and, worldly or secular. And I think that that's so powerful as well to give that
Yeah.
a turn to that.
And I think what's interesting too is maybe there's baby steps. Maybe you start off with the friends with the chips, and then you stand up to your family, and then you stand up to society. Maybe all of this are the baby steps away from fitting in, blending, being one of the crowd, being beige. And so as we move away from beige and fitting in and being just bland, and we find our backbone, we find our two legs to stand on, we can change the world one person at a time. So the fact that this is a social kind of thing right now, this is, what did you call it? Like a viral, what did you say the villain era is?
Trend. I don't
It's
know.
a trend, right? So as we're seeing things like this trending, people that haven't understood how to take their power back, because this is the thing. If you are raised by a controlling, manipulative, bullying parent or set of parents, it
But
is
I
going
think
to be.
even if you're not raised by them, because I was raised by Meredith Willits, and I still didn't know how to own my shit. So I
Yeah.
think both sides can have it. Continue. Sorry.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm just saying, like, if you've never seen it, but at the same time, had you ever seen me own my own shit? So either you could be raised by someone who's controlling and holds you down, or you can be raised by someone like me for all these years that never really stood up for myself. So you'd never seen me act that way. You'd never seen a woman be strong in that way. But I'm also a Libra and you're a Scorpio, so who the hell knows? A lot of times you teach me shit.
I just be living my life.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that we're all learning from each other. I know that my generation is learning a shit ton from you guys because of the fact that we were just raised so differently. The baby boomers that were, burning the house down in their bras and, doing it so differently than their parents. It's kind of interesting because then there was my generation X, which was kind of, I don't know, we're surviving literally. And now your generation is activists again. So it's like activists and then comma, and then activists. Like your generation, 20 somethings, yeah, are activists. And so you need to have that strong backbone. There was no
100%.
activism. Like this is the first, I think what was it, the women's march was probably the first activism of my generation. Literally, there was nothing.
You guys had low rise jeans and
We were like beige.
weird.
I know, it's so strange. Does anybody have a question? Hi Darius, nice to see you over here. Jody, Liz, Kristen, let's see, I saw, we gotta come over. Sharon over here. Does anyone have anything that they want to add about are you guys in your villain era? What's going
Or
on?
any clarifications we can make? Did we fully explain the villain era? Do we understand what it is? And do we
Are
understand?
you in your villain era? I don't know if I'm in my villain era. I think that I'm on the other side of my villain era. I think that I'm done pushing against. I think I'm almost numb at this point with regard to standing up for myself. I know another one is coming. Ooh, that's interesting.
Two villain eras.
Ooh, villain eras. So my first villain era, here's a whole nother topic. What the hell? So my first villain era had to do with my family. But I feel like my next villain era might be more social, like more society, more interesting, more a bigger perspective. But I couldn't have
think
gone
that's kind
to
of like what you said, though, is that you
yeah.
have to take steps in your villain era of
Yeah.
Martin Luther King didn't just one day say, huzzah,
Hi. Hey,
hello,
let's
I
let's
am
change
him.
the world. Yeah.
I
It's
think he
by
had to
step.
stand up and probably one day stand up for himself singularly on
Yeah,
a
but how
one
interesting though is his dad was a preacher, right? I believe his dad was a pastor. So maybe he
in
watched
the
his
church.
dad stand up for people over and over and over again. So he had that role model. I would have to look into that.
That'd
But
be
yeah, I
interesting.
think that we're probably going to go through a few different villain eras in our lifetimes. It matters where we're headed. Um, but yeah, I feel like definitely. What is she saying?
She said, Kenzie has never been in her villain era, LMAO. Now, I feel like this is a good point to bring up, though, is can you go through your life without being in your villain era? And does that have any type of negative effect on living? Like, is
Yeah.
it okay just to be beige?
So I actually know Kenzie, and it's funny because Kenzie is her own villain era. She, I think she just stands up for herself kind of unapologetically. So there's never been an era. I think that she's just the smallest, ballsiest person that I mean, she just doesn't give any shits, right? I mean, what do you think, Jody? We have a speaker for
Oops.
her?
Yeah, she gives no shits at all.
See? So she doesn't have an era. She's just, I feel like Kenzie, this is Jody's daughter here. I
It's
feel
her
like,
villain life.
yeah, I feel like she would stand up to anyone, anything at any time for any reason. And when she doesn't, it's because she doesn't give any shits.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, without a doubt. But I mean, do you think that you've had to go through a villain era, Jody?
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, definitely. When I left my ex-husband and had
Mm,
to fight with him over his disabled daughter. That was my villain era. And I won. So,
Yeah.
isn't it so interesting though how we have to find that in ourselves?
yes.
But we do. It's almost like we're forced to. I think it's very interesting. Do you feel that you were being a villain, or do you feel like you had to embody that archetype, or do you feel like it just it was a natural progression?
It was a natural progression with the way things went with Amanda and her sperm donor biological father. So,
Yeah.
it just came to the point where I was like, okay, screw this and screw you. And she is your daughter, and this is the way it's going to be. You're either going to support her or spend time in jail. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's so amazing, especially when it comes to your kids. You will stand up. Go ahead, Skylar.
But I feel like there's always that sorry, there's a loud bang. There's always that snapping point. Like there's always like at least for me there was something that pushed me there. For you it was your ex-husband that kind of got you there. And it's kind of interesting, at least for me, I thought that was such a negative experience and I was so upset in that moment. But now that I'm on the other side of it and everything that I've learned from it and how much of a stronger person I am. I mean, Jody, do you think your villain era did you good?
Oh,
Oh, yes, absolutely it did. I finally was able to stand up to him and for myself because it was an abusive relationship and stuff. But when I got to that point where, I was just able to say F you to him and grow because of it and stand up for myself and our daughter, it was just, now that I'm past that, I laugh about it because
right.
he never expected it from me and it was wonderful.
It's also almost like,
Yeah.
how could you, like, you almost look back on yourself and be like, how could you have ever not done that?
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, where,
Yeah.
like, girl, what was going on in your brain? I mean,
Right.
not in that
Yeah.
moment. Everything's different, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that everything is a building experience. And once we go through something like that, it's like you can never go back and let someone treat you like crap ever again. Like that's the one thing as we move through these eras of our life or these growing catalyst expansion moments of life, it's like you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. You can never ever be that person that's walked on ever again because now you have found your power for whatever reason. And so now there's just no going back ever.
Right.
That's so amazing.
100%. I
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on stage, Jody. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Jody.
So,
Thanks for showing up. Yeah, I mean, and for me too, I think what's so interesting is like to look back. And I mean, that's one thing that is beautiful with age is when you look back at your life and you're like, how did I ever put up with any of that nonsense? And so as we grow, that's the beauty of getting older is that we do, when you know better, you do better. Maya Angelou. And so, that's, I think, with the villain era is that we're starting to know better and we're starting to do better. We're not putting up with people's shit. We realize that we are safe. We are outside of our, parental household. We're outside of having to be friends with only the people in our high school. Now, all of a sudden, we're adults in college or, we're not stuck seeing the same, 100 people every day in a high school setting. And so there's freedom as we move forward in life and realize we can get a divorce. We can stop being friends with them. We can put up healthy boundaries or go no contact with family or friends or whatever it is. And so I love this conversation. I love the way it's evolved. I loved the idea of creating an archetype of the villain when needed. Because when we're using the archetype of the villain against the bully or the manipulator or the person that is the predatory behavior, then it's used for, for good and for positive. And I think that's awesome and I love it.
Great talk as always. I love our Mondays.
As always. Does anyone have anything to say before we go this week? I don't even know what we decided. I don't know what we're talking about next week. We'll have to post it once we come up with a topic. We haven't gone that far, but we are here every Monday at 7 Central, 8 Eastern. Skylar and I will dishing it up. If you have any questions or anything you want us to talk about, I am a life coach, spiritual counselor, medium, and psychic. And Skylar owns her own business. She's an entrepreneur. She's a headhunter. And so if you want us to talk about anything, feel free to email me at meredithwillits@gmail.com and we will talk about your topic. But this has been great. The villain era, Skylar, thank you for the awesome topic. I love it.
Love you.